Laura Mitchell stared at the yellow telegram in her hands, reading the same impossible words for the third time. Your husband is dead. Come claim his ranch before the bank takes it. Signed, Thomas Hartley, Elk Ridge Ranch, Colorado. Her fingers trembled as she set the paper down on her small kitchen table. The problem was simple and terrifying. Laura had never been married, and she had never heard of Elk Ridge Ranch or anyone named James Mitchell. But that wasn't the strangest part. 3 days later, when Laura visited the courthouse in Chicago, she discovered documents that made her blood run cold. A marriage certificate dated 2 years ago bore her signature, a signature she had never written. Property deeds showed her as the legal wife of James Mitchell, owner of a cattle ranch in Colorado. Bank records listed her as the beneficiary of his estate. Everything looked official. Everything looked real, but Laura knew she had never signed a single paper. Laura lived alone in a tiny apartment above Murphy's dress shop, where she worked as a seamstress. At 26, she had never been in love, never been kissed, never shared her heart with anyone. Her parents died when she was 16, leaving her with nothing but needle and thread skills and a fierce determination to survive on her own. She trusted no one, needed no one, and liked it that way. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford and a risk she wouldn't take. Yet here she was, 3 weeks later, sitting on a train bound for Colorado with a ticket bought using money from a bank account she didn't know existed. The lawyer had been clear. If she didn't claim the ranch within 30 days, the bank would seize it for unpaid debts. Something deep in Laura's gut told her this was connected to her past, though she couldn't understand how. Maybe James Mitchell held answers to questions she didn't even know she should ask. The train pulled into Elk Ridge just as the sun painted the mountains gold and purple. Laura stepped onto the platform, clutching her single carpet bag, her heart pounding with fear and curiosity. The town was smaller than she expected. A main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and maybe 30 houses scattered around like seeds tossed by the wind. Mountains rose on all sides, making her feel both protected and trapped. A tall man in a worn cowboy hat approached her. He had broad shoulders, kind eyes the color of coffee, and hands that looked strong enough to gentle a wild horse. "You must be Laura," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm Tom Hartley. I work for your husband." He paused, taking off his hat. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. James was a good man." Laura's mouth went dry. This stranger believed she was a widow, believed she had loved and lost a husband. She opened her mouth to correct him, but something in his eyes stopped her. He looked at her with such hope, such relief, as if her presence could somehow heal an open wound. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. Tom helped her into a wagon, and they rode in silence through rolling hills dotted with cattle. The ranch house came into view as the stars appeared. A simple wooden structure with a stone chimney, surrounded by barns and corrals. It looked like the kind of home Laura had dreamed about as a child, the kind of place where families gathered around dinner tables and children played in the yard. "James talked about you every day," Tom said as he helped her down from the wagon. "Said you were the prettiest girl in Chicago, with hair like spun gold and a laugh that could make a man forget his troubles. He said you had walls around your heart taller than these mountains, but he was determined to climb them." Laura touched her blonde hair self-consciously. How could a dead man she'd never met describe her so perfectly? "I don't understand," she said softly. "We were married, but I feel like I never really knew him." Tom stepped closer, his eyes searching her face in the moonlight. "He told me something else," he said. "He said you'd never shared your heart with anyone before him. Said you'd been hurt too many times to trust easy." Laura's breath caught in her throat. It was true, every word of it. How could James Mitchell know her deepest secrets? "That's because I haven't," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I've never shared my heart with anyone." Tom reached out slowly, gently touching her hand. "Then share it with me forever," he said. "James asked me to take care of you. If anything happened to him, let me keep that promise. Something electric passed between them in that moment. Laura felt a warmth she had never experienced, a pull toward this gentle cowboy who spoke of forever as if it were a real possibility. But beneath the attraction and the mysterious connection, fear crept up her spine. Someone had forged her signature, created a false life for her, and brought her here under a dead man's name. Whatever game was being played, she was already in the middle of it. That night, alone in the bedroom that supposedly belonged to her and James, Laura found a letter on the dresser addressed to my dearest wife. The handwriting was masculine, confident, and full of love. My darling Laura, it began, if you are reading this, then I am gone and Tom has brought you home where you belong. Laura's hands shook as she continued reading James's letter by candlelight. I know you're confused, my love, but everything I did was to protect you. You have a beautiful smile that lights up your whole face, especially when you're working on that blue dress with the pearl buttons, the one you finished last Tuesday evening by the window. Laura dropped the letter, her heart racing. She had finished that exact dress last Tuesday. How could a dead man know something so specific about her daily life in Chicago? She picked up the letter again, afraid of what else it might reveal. You have a small scar on your left wrist from when you were 7 and fell off Mrs. Henderson's fence. You drink your coffee black because sugar reminds you of better times you can't afford to remember. Every night before sleep, you read 3 pages from that worn copy of Jane Austen, and you always stop at the same place when Elizabeth first sees Darcy's estate. Every word was true. Every single detail was a piece of her private world that no one else knew. The next morning, Tom knocked gently on her door. Laura, I brought you some breakfast. When she opened it, he stood there with a plate of eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits, looking at her with such genuine concern that her chest tightened. You look pale. Did you sleep at all? Not much, she admitted, stepping aside to let him in. Tom set the plate on the small table and noticed the letter in her hands. That's James's handwriting, he said softly. He wrote you letters every week, even when you two had that fight last spring. Never mailed them, just kept them in that old cigar box. Laura's stomach twisted with guilt, but she forced herself to play along. He was always writing, she said carefully. Sometimes I think he loved his words more than he loved me. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Tom's face fell. Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, James worshipped the ground you walked on. Maybe he wasn't good with saying things out loud, but everything he did was for you. This whole ranch, he built it thinking about the day you'd come home to stay. After breakfast, Tom showed Laura around the property. The ranch was bigger than she'd realized, with over 100 head of cattle, for horses, and fields that stretched toward the mountains. James left detailed instructions about everything. Tom explained as they walked. He wanted to make sure you'd never have to worry about money or taking care of yourself. What surprised Laura most was how natural ranch life felt to her. When Tom showed her how to collect eggs from the chickens, her movements were sure and confident. She helped him mend a fence post, her hands steady with a hammer. At lunch, she cooked a pot of stew that tasted better than anything she'd made in Chicago. It was as if some part of her already knew this life, already belonged in this place. The townspeople welcomed her with open arms. Mrs. Patterson from the general store hugged her tight and said, "Oh, honey, we're so glad you finally came home. James talked about you constantly, how proud he was of a city bride, how much he missed you." The preacher's wife brought over a casserole and fresh bread. "Your husband was a good man," she said with tears in her eyes. "He donated money to fix our church roof and never wanted credit for it." Every kindness made Laura's guilt grow heavier. These people genuinely mourned James, genuinely cared about her as his widow. She was living a lie, but it was a lie that seemed to bring comfort to everyone around her. More troubling was the way her heart responded to Tom's gentle care. When he draped his jacket around her shoulders during the evening chill, when he made sure she had enough firewood, when he listened to her talk about her dreams of having a garden, She felt something she'd never experienced before. Safety, belonging, the dangerous beginning of love. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Tom turned to her with serious eyes. "Laura, can I ask you something? James said you two got married quick, maybe too quick. He worried he pushed you into something you weren't ready for. Is that why you stayed in Chicago so long? Were you afraid to be his wife?" Laura's throat tightened. How could she answer without revealing the truth? "I was afraid," she said finally, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I'd never trusted anyone enough to share my life with them. James was asking me to give up everything familiar and start over. Tom nodded slowly. He knew that. Said it was worth waiting for, because when you finally open your heart, it would be worth everything he'd gone through. He reached over and gently took her hand. I see why he was willing to wait. You're stronger than you think, Laura. Braver too. That night, alone in her room, Laura searched through James's belongings, looking for answers. In his dresser drawer, hidden beneath folded shirts, she found a wooden box filled with photographs. Her breath caught as she lifted them out. Every single photograph was of her, walking to work in Chicago, sitting by her window sewing, buying groceries at the market. Someone had been watching her for months, documenting her daily life like she was a specimen in a jar. At the bottom of the box was a note in James's handwriting. "She's perfect. Exactly what we need. Begin phase 2. Laura stared at the photographs scattered across her bed, her hands trembling. James hadn't just known her. He had been stalking her. Every picture showed her going about her daily life in Chicago, completely unaware that someone was watching from the shadows. There were photos of her leaving work, hanging laundry on the roof, even sitting by her window reading at night. The most disturbing part was how careful the photographer had been, capturing her from angles that showed her face clearly, like he was documenting her for someone else. She dressed quickly and crept through the dark house to James's study. If he had been watching her, there had to be more evidence somewhere. Behind his desk, she found a loose floorboard that lifted easily. Hidden underneath was a leather portfolio filled with documents that made her blood turn to ice. There were detailed reports about her daily schedule, her work habits, even notes about her personality. Subject is isolated, distrustful, no close relationships. Perfect candidate for a relocation project. Another document made everything clear. It was a contract signed by James Mitchell, agreeing to acquire and relocate Laura Mitchell to Colorado Territory in exchange for payment of $5,000. At the bottom was a signature she recognized from wanted posters she'd seen around Chicago. Vincent Kane, the most dangerous crime boss in the city. Laura's legs gave out, and she sank into James's chair as the truth crashed over her. 6 months ago, Laura had been working late at the dress shop when she heard shouting from the alley behind the building. She looked out the window and saw Vincent Kane himself beating a man to death with a metal pipe. Their eyes had met for one terrifying second before she ducked away from the window. The next day, she heard that the victim was a newspaper reporter who'd been investigating Kane's operations. Laura had never told anyone what she witnessed, but somehow Kane had found out she was there. James hadn't been her loving husband. He'd been hired to kidnap her. The fake marriage documents were meant to give him legal control over her, a way to bring her to Colorado without raising suspicions. But something had gone wrong with his plan. The dates on the contract showed that James should have delivered her to Kane months ago. Instead, he'd been writing her love letters and telling his brother about his wife in Chicago. Laura heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly shoved the documents back into their hiding place. Tom appeared in the doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. "I saw the light under the door." "I was just looking through James's things," Laura said, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to understand him better. Tom came closer, and in the lamplight, she could see the pain that lived behind his kind eyes. "Tell me about your brother," she said. "What was he like before he met me?" Tom sat down across from her, running his hands through his dark hair. James was always the charmer, always had big plans and bigger dreams. Our parents died when I was 15 and he was 17. He took care of me, made sure I finished school, taught me everything about ranching. But he was restless, always looking for the next adventure, the next opportunity to make it rich quick. Did he ever get involved with dangerous people? Laura asked carefully. Tom's expression darkened. There was a time, maybe 2 years ago, when he started receiving letters from back east. He'd get secretive, ride into town for meetings with strangers. When I asked about it, he'd just say he was working on something that would set us up for life. Then suddenly, he started talking about you. Laura's heart raced. That timeline matched exactly with Kane's discovery that she'd witnessed the murder. What did he say about me? That he'd found the woman he was going to marry, that she was beautiful and kind, but had been hurt by life. He showed me your picture, said you didn't know it yet, but you two were meant to be together. Tom's voice grew softer. He said you needed protecting, that there were bad men looking for you, and he was going to be the one to keep you safe. The pieces were falling into place. James had been hired to kidnap her, but somewhere along the way, he'd actually fallen in love with her photograph, with the idea of her. He decided to protect her instead of delivering her to Kane. That's why he created the fake marriage documents. Not to trap her, but to give her a new identity and a safe place to hide. Tom, Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper, there's something I need to tell you. But before she could continue, he stood up and moved closer to her chair. In the dim light, he looked strong and solid and completely trustworthy. Whatever it is, it can wait, he said gently. What matters is that you're here now and you're safe. He reached out and touched her cheek, his calloused thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. James may have brought you here, but I'm the one who's going to make sure you stay. Laura leaned into his touch, her resolve crumbling. For the first time in her life, she wanted to trust someone completely. She wanted to tell Tom everything and let him help her carry the weight of her fears. I've never felt safe anywhere, she whispered. Not until I came here. Tom's eyes searched her face. Then stay, he said. Not as James's widow, but as yourself. Stay and let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. I know it's too soon. I know it's not proper, but I can't pretend I don't feel this way about you. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Laura had never been kissed before, had never let anyone close enough to try. But with Tom, everything felt right. She kissed him back, pouring all her longing for safety and love into that one perfect moment. They broke apart when the sound of horses thundered into the yard. Through the window, Laura saw 3 riders approaching the house fast and hard. Tom grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace just as someone pounded on the front door. A rough voice shouted, "Open up. We're looking for Laura Mitchell, and we know she's in there." Laura's blood turned to ice. After months of hiding, Vincent Kane had finally found her. Tom motioned for Laura to get behind him as the pounding on the door grew louder. "Stay back," he whispered, raising his rifle. "Whatever happens, don't let them see you." But Laura's legs felt like water. She knew that voice shouting outside. It was Vincent Kane himself. After months of running and hiding, her worst nightmare had found her in the one place she'd started to feel safe. "We ain't going away, Mitchell." Kane's voice boomed through the wooden door. "We know James's little wife is in there, and we've got business to discuss." Tom looked at Laura with confusion and growing alarm. "Laura, who are these men? What business could they have with you?" Before she could answer, the front door exploded inward. 3 men stepped into the house, their guns drawn and their faces hard as stone. The man in the center was exactly as Laura remembered, tall, thin, with cold gray eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Well," Vincent Kane said, looking directly at Laura, "there's the little seamstress who's been causing me so much trouble." He gestured to his men. "Boys, meet the woman who thinks she saw something she shouldn't have seen." Tom stepped protectively in front of Laura, his rifle aimed at Kane's chest. "I don't know who you are, mister, but you're trespassing on private property. You've got 10 seconds to get out before I start shooting." Kane laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Easy there, cowboy. I'm Vincent Kane, and your dear departed brother James worked for me. Didn't she tell you?" He looked past Tom at Laura's pale face. "Oh, she didn't tell you anything, did she? How interesting." "Tom," Laura whispered, her voice shaking. "I can explain." "No need for explanations, sweetheart," Kane interrupted. "I'll tell him everything myself." He holstered his gun and clasped his hands behind his back like he was giving a lecture. "You see, Tom, your brother James wasn't the upstanding rancher you thought he was. He was a con man who worked jobs for me back east. His last assignment was simple: marry this little witness and bring her to me so I could permanently solve the problem." Tom's face went white. "That's not possible." James loved Laura. They were married for 2 years. "They were never married," Kane said with obvious pleasure. "Those documents were forged to make the kidnapping look legal. James was supposed to drug her, put her on a train, and deliver her to Chicago. Instead, the fool fell in love with her picture and decided to play hero. He shook his head with mock sadness. Cost him his life, that decision did." Laura gasped. "You killed James?" "Had to," Kane said simply. "When he missed his deadline and stopped answering my letters, I came to Colorado to see what the holdup was. Found him planning to confess everything to you and help you disappear for good. Couldn't let that happen." His smile turned cruel. One little push off a cliff, and suddenly James had a tragic riding accident. Tom's rifle wavered as the truth hit him. "James didn't die in an accident. You murdered my brother." "Business is business," Kane replied with a shrug. "Now, Miss Laura here witnessed me kill a nosy reporter 6 months ago. She's the only person who can put me at that scene, so I need her to come back to Chicago with me. Nothing personal, you understand. Just tying up loose ends." Laura found her voice at last. "I never told anyone what I saw. I never went to the police. Why couldn't you just leave me alone?" Kane's expression darkened. "Because witnesses have a way of growing a conscience. Today you keep quiet. Tomorrow you might decide to be a hero. I don't leave loose ends." He nodded to his men. "Take her." Tom stepped forward, his finger on the trigger. "She's not going anywhere with you." But Kane was ready for this. One of his men had circled around behind them while Kane was talking. Laura felt a gun barrel press against the back of her neck. "Drop the rifle, cowboy, or I'll paint the wall with her brains right now," the gunman said. Tom's hands shook with rage, but he slowly lowered his weapon. "Don't hurt her. Whatever you want, we can work something out." Kane picked up Tom's rifle and examined it admiringly. "Nice piece. James always did have good taste in weapons. Too bad he had terrible taste in friends." He looked at Laura with those cold eyes. "Here's how this works, sweetheart. You come with me quietly, and your cowboy friend gets to keep breathing. You try to run or cause trouble, and I'll burn this ranch to the ground with everyone in it." Laura's mind raced. She couldn't let Tom die because of her, but she knew Kane would never let either of them live once he had what he wanted. "Give me a minute to pack my things," she said, trying to buy time to think. "You won't need anything where you're going," Kane said. "But I'm feeling generous." 1 minute. As Laura moved toward the stairs, she caught Tom's eye and mouthed the word window. He gave a slightest nod, understanding immediately. If she could get to the second floor and climb out the bedroom window, she might be able to reach the barn where the horses were kept. But Kane was smarter than she'd hoped. "Actually, on second thought, we'll all go upstairs together. I don't trust you not to try something stupid." He waved his gun toward the staircase. "After you, sweetheart. And Tom, you're coming too. Can't have you riding for help while we're busy packing." As they climbed the stairs, Laura's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. At the top, Kane's men positioned themselves by the windows while Kane himself watched every move she made. She opened her carpet bag and began folding her few dresses, her mind desperately searching for an escape plan. That's when she remembered the Derringer. James had left a small gun in the bedside table drawer. She found it weeks ago while looking for a sewing kit. If she could get to it without Kane noticing— "Hurry up," Kane said impatiently. "I want to be back in Chicago before." The sound of approaching horses cut him off. Through the window, Laura could see at least 6 riders coming hard toward the ranch. Kane cursed and motioned to his men. "Looks like your boyfriend sent word to the neighbors before he got here. No matter. We'll shoot our way out if we have to." But as the riders got closer, Laura recognized the lead horse. It was Sheriff Morrison from town, and he had deputies with him. Tom caught her eye and smiled grimly. "I sent word to town yesterday," he said to Kane. "Told the sheriff I was expecting trouble. Guess he decided to check on us." Kane's face twisted with rage. "You planned this." "No," Tom said, "but I've been hoping for it." In the confusion of the sheriff's arrival, Tom lunged forward and tackled Kane. They crashed to the floor, fighting for control of the gun. Laura dove for the bedside table and grabbed the derringer just as one of Kane's men turned toward her. Outside, Sheriff Morrison's voice boomed across the yard. "This is the law. Come out with your hands up." Laura pointed the small gun at Kane's remaining gunmen with steady hands. For the first time in months, she wasn't afraid. She was angry. "It's over," she said. "Drop your weapon." The gunman facing Laura hesitated, his eyes darting between her small derringer and the sounds of Sheriff Morrison's men surrounding the house. "Boss," he called to Kane, who was still wrestling with Tom on the floor. "We got lawmen everywhere out there." Kane managed to break free from Tom's grip and scrambled to his feet, his face bleeding from where Tom had landed a solid punch. "I don't care if the whole army's out there," he snarled, pulling a backup pistol from his boot. "That woman is coming with me, dead or alive." He pointed the gun at Laura's chest. "Drop that toy gun, sweetheart, or I'll put a bullet through your heart right here." Laura's hand trembled, but she kept the derringer aimed at Kane. "You're going to kill me anyway. At least this way, Tom has a chance to live." Outside, she could hear Sheriff Morrison organizing his men, their voices growing closer to the house. "The sheriff knows you're here now. Even if you kill us both, you'll never make it out of Colorado alive." Kane's laugh was bitter and desperate. "You think I got where I am by giving up easy? I've been killing people longer than you've been breathing, girl. A few country deputies don't scare me." He cocked his pistol. "Last chance. Drop the gun and come quiet, or I start shooting everyone in this room." That's when Tom made his move. Still on the floor, he grabbed Kane's ankle and yanked hard, sending the crime boss stumbling backward. Kane's shot went wild, shattering the window instead of hitting Laura. Tom rolled away as Kane tried to aim again, putting himself between the gunman and Laura. "Tom, no!" Laura screamed, but it was too late. Kane fired again, and Tom cried out as the bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the wall hard and slid to the floor, blood soaking through his shirt. Laura's fear transformed into pure rage. The shy seamstress who had run from Chicago disappeared, replaced by a woman who would protect the man she loved at any cost. She fired the derringer without hesitation. The small bullet caught Kane in the chest, and he staggered backward, surprise written across his face. "You little—" Kane raised his gun toward Laura, but his hand was shaking now, blood spreading across his white shirt. Before he could pull the trigger, the bedroom door exploded inward. Sheriff Morrison and 2 deputies burst into the room, their weapons drawn. "Drop your guns. Now!" Morrison shouted. Kane's remaining gunman immediately threw down his pistol and raised his hands, but Kane himself wavered, his gun still pointed in Laura's direction. Blood dripped from his mouth as he fought to stay conscious. "Vincent Kane," Morrison said, recognition dawning on his face. "Well, I'll be damned. We've got wanted posters on you all the way from New York to California." He took a step closer, his rifle aimed at Kane's head. "You're under arrest for murder, kidnapping, and about a dozen other charges." Kane's legs gave out, and he sank to his knees, his pistol clattering to the floor. "This ain't over," he wheezed, looking at Laura with hatred burning in his eyes. I got friends. They'll come for you. Your friends will be too busy running from federal marshals, Morrison replied. We've been tracking your organization for months, Kane. This little adventure of yours just gave us everything we needed to shut down your whole operation. He nodded to his deputies. Get him to Doc Williams before he bleeds to death. We need him alive for trial. As the deputies carried Kane away, Laura dropped the derringer and rushed to Tom's side. He was conscious but pale, his hand pressed against the bleeding wound in his shoulder. How bad is it? She asked, her voice breaking. Tom managed a weak smile. Takes more than one bullet to kill a stubborn cowboy, he said. But I don't recommend getting shot. Hurts like hell. He reached up with his good hand and touched her face. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? I'm fine, Laura whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. But you almost died protecting me. Why would you do that when you know I lied to you about everything? Tom's eyes were serious despite his pain. Because I love you, he said simply. Not James's wife, not some stranger from Chicago. I love you, Laura Mitchell, exactly as you are. He winced as Sheriff Morrison helped him sit up straighter. The lies don't matter. What matters is the woman you are right here, right now. Sheriff Morrison finished bandaging Tom's shoulder with strips torn from a bedsheet. He'll live, he told Laura. Bullet went clean through. He'll be sore for a while, but there's no permanent damage. He looked at Laura with new respect. That was good shooting, miss. Not many folks could face down Vincent Kane and live to tell about it. Laura shook her head. I was terrified the whole time. I just couldn't let him hurt Tom. That's what courage is, Morrison said. Being scared but doing the right thing anyway. He helped Tom to his feet, letting the wounded man lean on him for support. Now, I'm going to need statements from both of you about what happened here. But first, let's get Tom down to the kitchen where he can sit proper. As they made their way downstairs, Morrison continued talking. Kane's been wanted by federal authorities for years. That murder you witnessed in Chicago was just the latest in a long string of killings. When word gets out that he's been captured, there'll be a lot of grateful people across the country. In the kitchen, Morrison poured himself a cup of coffee while Tom slumped in a chair, his face still pale, but his breathing steady. Laura sat beside him, unable to stop touching his good hand, reassuring herself that he was really alive and safe. There's something else you both should know, Morrison said, settling into a chair across from them. We found James's body 3 months ago, up in the canyon where Kane said he pushed him. We suspected it wasn't an accident, but we didn't have any evidence until today. Kane's confession just now will finally give James the justice he deserves. Laura felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. James had died trying to protect her, trying to make up for the wrong he'd originally planned to do. In the end, he'd been a better man than anyone knew. Tom squeezed her hand. So what happens now? He asked Morrison. Will Laura be safe? Are there more of Kane's men who might come looking for her? Morrison shook his head. Kane's organization is finished. We've been working with federal marshals to round up his associates for weeks. Today was the final piece of the puzzle. He looked at Laura kindly. You're free to go wherever you want, miss. Build whatever life makes you happy. Laura looked at Tom, at his kind eyes and gentle smile, at the home they'd begun to build together, even though it was founded on lies and confusion. I want to stay here, she said softly, if Tom will have me. Not as James's widow, but as myself. Tom brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I've been waiting my whole life for you, Laura Mitchell. I'm not about to let you get away now. 3 weeks later, Laura sat by Tom's bedside as morning sunlight streamed through the windows of their bedroom. His shoulder was healing well, but she still insisted on changing his bandages every day, her gentle fingers careful not to cause him pain. You're hovering again, Tom said with a smile, catching her hand as she adjusted his pillow for the 3rd time. I almost lost you, Laura replied, bringing his hand to her lips. I'm allowed to hover. The memory of that terrible moment when Kane's bullet hit him still made her heart race with fear. For 3 days after the shooting, Tom had battled a fever while Laura sat by his side, refusing to leave even when exhaustion made her sway in her chair. "But you didn't lose me," Tom said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." He pulled her closer until she was sitting on the edge of the bed. "Laura, we need to talk about our future, about what happens now that the truth is out." Laura's stomach tightened with familiar fear. "Are you having second thoughts? Now that you know I'm not really your brother's widow, that everything between us started with a lie?" Tom's eyes softened. "The only thing I'm having second thoughts about is waiting so long to do this properly." To her amazement, he struggled to sit up and then, moving carefully because of his injured shoulder, slid off the bed and onto one knee beside her. From his shirt pocket, he pulled out a simple gold ring. "Laura Mitchell, I don't care where you came from or what brought you to me. I only care about where we're going together." Laura's breath caught as Tom took her left hand. "I know we've done everything backward, falling in love before we even knew each other's real names, living as husband and wife when we weren't married at all. But I want to do this part right." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Will you marry me? Not because of forged documents or fake identities, but because I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone." Tears streamed down Laura's face as she looked at this man who had risked his life for her, who had seen her at her most frightened and vulnerable and chosen to love her anyway. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Tom Hartley." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his mother's ring. He told her later, saved all these years for the woman he would truly love. When he kissed her, it tasted like promises and new beginnings and the future they would build together. The next morning, Laura woke to find Tom already dressed and moving around the kitchen, his arm in a sling, but his spirits high. "Doc Williams says I'm healing faster than expected," he announced as she came downstairs. "And Mrs. Patterson from the general store is organizing the whole town for our wedding. Apparently, everyone's been hoping we'd make it official." Laura poured herself coffee, marveling at how natural it felt to plan a future instead of running from the past. "Tom, there's something I need to tell you. About children." Her voice grew quiet. "I don't know if I can have them. I've never. That is, I don't know if I'll be the wife you deserve." Tom set down his coffee cup and crossed her, taking her hands in his good one. "Laura, you are exactly the wife I deserve. Kind, brave, loyal, and stronger than you know. If we have children, we'll love them. If we don't, we'll love each other. That's enough for me. Is it enough for you?" For the first time in her life, Laura felt completely accepted, completely valued for who she was rather than what she could provide. "It's more than enough," she said. "It's everything." 2 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday morning in October, the entire town of Elk Ridge gathered at the little white church for the wedding of Tom Hartley and Laura Mitchell. Laura wore a dress borrowed from the preacher's daughter, simple blue cotton with lace at the collar. Tom stood at the altar in his best suit, his arms still in a sling, but his smile brighter than the sun streaming through the stained glass windows. Sheriff Morrison walked Laura down the aisle, having offered when she mentioned she had no family to give her away. "You're not alone anymore," he had told her. "This whole town considers you family now." As they walked, Laura saw faces filled with genuine affection. Mrs. Patterson dabbing at her eyes, the blacksmith and his wife beaming from the second pew, children from the schoolhouse craning their necks to see the bride. When they reached the altar, Sheriff Morrison placed Laura's hand in Tom's and whispered, "Take care of each other." The preacher began the ceremony, his voice carrying clearly through the packed church. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found their home in each other." As they exchanged vows, Laura thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear, the lies, the danger, and finally the courage to trust and love. When Tom promised to cherish and protect her for all the days of his life, she believed him completely. When she promised to share her heart with him forever, the words came from a place deeper than fear, deeper than doubt. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher announced, and Tom pulled Laura close with his good arm, kissing her as the church erupted in applause and cheers. Mrs. Patterson had organized a reception in the church hall, complete with a cake she'd baked herself and fiddle music for dancing. As the sun set over the mountains, Tom and Laura stood on the porch of their ranch house, truly their home now. Tom's arm was around her waist, and Laura's head rested on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. Laura thought about the woman she'd been just months ago, alone, afraid, trusting no one. Then she looked at the life she'd built here, the community that had embraced her, the man who loved her completely. "I never knew I could be this happy," she said. "I spent so many years guarding my heart, thinking that was the only way to stay safe. But the safest place turned out to be right here with you." Tom turned her to face him, his eyes serious in the fading light. "Do you remember what I said that first night when you told me you'd never shared your heart with anyone?" Laura smiled, thinking back to that moment that seemed like a lifetime ago. "You said, 'Then share it with me forever.' And do you?" Tom asked. "Share it with me forever?" Laura stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, putting all her love, all her trust, all her hopes for their future into that kiss. When they broke apart, she whispered against his lips, "Forever and always, Tom Hartley. My heart belongs to you." Above them, the first stars appeared in the Colorado sky, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed peacefully in the pastures. Laura Mitchell Hartley was finally completely home. 1 year later, Laura stood in the same spot on the porch, watching Tom work with the horses in the corral. Her hand rested on her growing belly. Their miracle, Doc Williams had called the baby, due to arrive in the spring. The ranch was thriving. The town had grown, and their love had only deepened with each passing season. Tom looked up and waved at her, his smile as warm as the day she'd first seen it. "I love you," he called across the yard. Laura placed both hands on her belly and called back, "We love you too." For a woman who had spent her whole life afraid to share her heart, she had discovered that love, real love, only grew stronger when it was shared freely and completely. If this story of hidden hearts, second chances, and love that conquers fear touched your soul, then you understand why we tell these tales of courage and romance. Here at Wild West Love Stories, we believe that sometimes the cowboy who promises forever is worth every risk, every leap of faith. Laura thought she'd never share her heart, but when Tom Hartley asked her to trust him with it forever, she discovered that love isn't about the risks we avoid. It's about the chances we're brave enough to take. Subscribe for more epic Western romances where love defies danger and hearts find their home on the frontier. Hit that bell, because some promises like true love are meant to last forever.